Thank you. Mr. Dyga, you're recognized.
Good morning. I want to thank you all as well for having this hearing and for your leadership on this issue. My name is Peter Dyga. I'm the president and CEO of Associated Builders and Contractors Florida East Coast chapter, as well as the ABC Institute and the ABC Cares Foundation. So the ABC Institute is the education affiliate of the Florida East Coast chapter. We are celebrating our 50th year of providing apprenticeship education in the state of Florida, and we find ourselves today the single largest provider of apprenticeship in the entire state of Florida. We have a student enrollment of 923, 654 of which are registered apprentices and 239 craft trainees. We educate in 7 different trades at 8 different locations, and 72% of our student enrollment are minorities. So I look forward to talking more about the value of apprenticeship education to the state of Florida and the taxpayers. And again, I appreciate you all having this hearing. Thank you for your leadership.
Thank you. And Mr. Chris Johnson.
I mentioned that the ABC Institute has been doing this 50 years. I believe that we've been very influential for a good part of those 50 years in the conversation and making sure the direction of this conversation has been a positive one. And I didn't want to go without saying that a large part of that credit belongs to the legislature in the last few years and the work that you've done, as well as our governor, in putting more light on this subject matter. So I wanted to say thank you again for that. But more work needs to be done for sure, which is again why we're here today. So we believe that apprenticeship education is an equally good first choice for post-secondary education, and that's what it is. An apprenticeship is a post-secondary education model that's very unique for many different ways. And in talking about what it takes for somebody to enroll and whatnot, and getting to the direct question, I was hoping I could spend a little time telling you why the state's investment in apprenticeship education is a great investment. So number one, and one of the things that's oftentimes very much overlooked, it's part of the qualification for being an apprentice, is people confuse apprenticeship with a work program. It's not a work program. It's not a work program because you can't be an apprentice unless you're already working. Oftentimes we get the question, how do we get more people to hire apprentices? Well, they're all hired already. That's a very important thing for you all to understand about apprenticeship education. It's an awesome part of that model because what it means is 100% of our students, near 100% at graduation, are placed. They're employed. The proverbial graduating with a degree that you're chasing a job, I got this degree and is there a job for it, doesn't exist with the apprenticeship model because every single one of our apprentices already are employed. The other added benefit of that is they're taxpayers while they're going through their education. They're paying on the tax rolls. So that is a very unique thing that we think makes the apprenticeship model stand out. A second thing is wages. We know that the average wages for a journeyman, a graduate, if you will, from an apprenticeship program, is higher than someone with a baccalaureate degree. That's just the facts according to the data that's out there. So you're investing in a model where the graduates are 100% placed, they're working while they're learning, they're making more at the end than the average person. Oh, and did we mention it's tuition free in the state of Florida? All right, there's a statute, 1009.25, which we sometimes have to battle as organizations because we think it's one of the things that makes the apprenticeship model unique. In a day and age when the culture and the conversation is evolving around the amount of debt that a lot of students are graduating with, we don't have that problem with the apprenticeship model. Now, in our model, it is, I like an apprenticeship to one of the oldest public-private partnerships in the business because it's the government and it's the industry making it happen. And in the ABC model, we do charge the contractor members, so they're investing just like the state is in their employees' education. That's not a requirement in the state of Florida, and we have to compete against people, so to speak, who don't do that. But we have found in our experience, having the employers vested helps when it comes to, why was your employee miss a class or helping us get the OJT reports done and whatnot. So when they're vested in the process, they're better partners. So we do that. And then the fourth thing I wanted to mention, and again, a part of what makes somebody successful, how we get them in. Where have you ever heard of this? Apprenticeship education has progressive wage increases as you go through your education. You know, now, as it turns out, most people are probably making, you know, above what those minimum progressive wage increases are. But if they're not, this model requires, as they go through the education process, that they be paid a certain minimum wage. And the final thing I wanted to mention that's awesome about apprenticeship education and why it's such a great investment for the state is we are building the entrepreneurs of the future. Many of our graduates are going to go open their own business someday. You know, they've got the skills and they're going to work for a while for somebody, but then they might go start their own company. So it's an amazing model, and I just want to say again, thank you to you all for asking, how can we improve? So I'm going to disagree a little bit, but I will say that if we continue to be as successful as we have been, there will be a time when we will need to invest more money. But I'm going to say, quite frankly, where we stand today, the biggest challenge we face is the funding model. So what I have to say to you all today is you all appropriate money to the Florida Department of Education, and they have a formula through their district workforce education funding summary that shows how they take that appropriation and send it to the various school districts or our partners, which we're required currently under law in order to draw down those state funds. But unfortunately, we're getting about, at the high end, 44%. In our case, and again, it's different for every provider, all those 329, I think, that was mentioned earlier, that now are registered apprenticeship programs in the state of Florida. Some of them utilize school district facilities. The instructors may be on their payroll. In the case of the ABC Institute, the instructors are on our payroll and they're all our facilities. So we would expect something more than 44%, reimbursement. And I'm not saying that the districts probably will tell you they're doing great things with that money, but our belief is you all as appropriators are sending money and you think it's going to apprentices, but only 44% of it is. So I would say we could utilize the money that's already being appropriated much better. And we, as providers, I think almost all 329 would universally agree that would allow us to reach more students, to provide a better quality program, to increase enrollment. So with the money that's already there, we could do some fixes and achieve great things.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I wanted to go back, Mr. Dyga, about the 44% of the dollars that are only used. Could you go back through that and then what your recommendations would be to change that?
You. Are there other questions? Oh, I'm sorry. You're recognized.
So thank you. So again, the legislature appropriates money to the Department of Education. The Department of Education has a formula, which they publish every year, called the District Workforce Education Funding Summary, where it's complicated, as you all know, with weighted factors, depending on what your program is, cost district differential, which I think you call something else now. There's but you work yourself through the formula and you realize that the money that's being appropriated and sent down to the district as a result of our student enrollment, they're only reimbursing us as a provider about 44%. All right. So, and the Department of Education will tell you they're under no obligation to spend those funds or appropriate them for any particular purpose. It's like when the Department of Education, they're figuring out how much money to send based on our student enrollment, but they're under no obligation to actually reimburse us for those students. So they make us, and again, I don't want to make enemies of our great partners for many, many decades. That's the way the system is set up, and we have to work with them. But again, we think you all are appropriating the money, and you would expect most of it, if the Department of Education is saying 5,600, and I forget what the number is, that they would not give just $1,900 reimbursement. So, the fix is limiting what they can keep for overhead or limiting what they can keep for their own programs. And I realize it wouldn't be a popular fight or battle, you know, because again, they probably would argue they're doing they probably are doing very valuable things. But our take is, again, you appropriate the money, and the DOE is saying they're sending the money for these apprentices, but in our case, only 44% at the high end. And there are a number of tertiary, smaller issues as well that I could get into that, you know, if we were, you know, king for a day, or you're asking us how to improve the system, I have a few other suggestions. But
Follow up?
Thank you. I would like to ask you how you would improve the system. And I'd like to also know where that 66% that's not coming to you, where specifically it goes.
You're recognized.
thank you. Well, the other 66% is staying with our LEA, our partners, if you will, that the statute requires us to work through in order to draw down the funding. So they're keeping it, and they're probably investing it into their own workforce development programs or whatnot. So, and again, I don't question the fact that they probably are doing some very valuable things. What we question is you're appropriating the money, and the Department of Education is appropriating in their formula a certain amount of funding per apprentice, but we're only getting 44%. So limiting the amount that they could keep would be one thing. We have a few other small challenges. At our district, for example, they charge us, our partner, they charge us a student activity fee. We think that it's small, it's peanuts, but that's silly. Our students never touch their campus, and they charge us a student activity fee. You know, so we have a very difficult time getting instructors approved because they're treated as if they're teachers in the school district. That's an issue, you know, and I'm going to be very blunt. We've had instructors that, for different reasons, one, because they were in the field in the last 5 years. One of the requirements our district requires, even though this person was a building inspector for a public entity, very well qualified to be an instructor. In other cases, someone might be have a public intoxication or some kind of, you know, minor legal problem when they were younger, many decades ago. And because they're treated like the Jessica Lunsford Act with a class, whatever that is, you know, background check, we've had instructors denied because of that too. And instructors are probably our biggest challenge in terms of growth. So getting around that challenge and that problem would be another issue for me, for us.
Thank you. We're going to go to Representative Mello. You're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Mr. Dyga, about kind of opening up the conversation with regard to the funding formula. I've looked at this formula. It is extremely complicated. This is a topic that I am very passionate about. So thank you for kind of talking about this funding formula and what I consider to be LEAs are somewhat a pass-through in many instances. You had mentioned that the funding is typically per apprentice. And do you have a cap on the number of apprentices that you can have in your program?
You're recognized.
Thank you. So gratefully, that's one of the challenges that we have very rarely faced with our LEA partner or the school district. They have very few times in the past, and it's been a decade or 15 years or so, I think, since the last time that was the case. But I know our sister chapter in the Florida Gulf Coast chapter faces that a lot with their partner. So,
Madam Chair, I have many questions.
Okay, follow up.
Thank you, Madam Chair. With regard also to the caps, do the apprentices have to complete the program to get the funding?
Recognized.
thank you. So yes, so maybe we spend a little time here talking about what apprenticeship is again. So an apprenticeship is a very legally defined post-secondary education model in the state of Florida that includes a combination of related technical instruction or classroom instruction. Our programs are anywhere from 144 to 220 hours, as well as on-the-job training, supervision and oversight. And that's up to 2,000 hours that the Department of Education will fund. So to answer your question, if our students miss a single class hour, whatever classroom hours, if they're not made up, that we're not reimbursed for. And the same goes for the OJT. which can be is quite a challenge, quite frankly, because, sometimes it might be months later, before we get the actual OJT reports and whatnot. So we're constantly with, I think, all the registered programs working on our students and our participating employers to make sure that those on-the-job training reports are due, because if we don't report the full 2,000 hours, we're not getting reimbursed for it. So
I'm curious.
Reviewed a lot of contracts over the last couple of years between various apprentice programs and LEAs. Would you talk about the challenges that you face or have faced in negotiating these contracts?
Mr. Dyga, you're recognized.
Okay, so I'm probably going to say something more controversial here. And by the way, if maybe we throw around a lot of acronyms in this business. So just to make sure that all the members are tracking, like when we say LEA, we're talking about the partnership that we're required, the contract that we're required to have with either a school district or a public college or university. So ours is we have 3 at our chapter, only one of which we run a student count through. We've tried to get more in our local community. We got all the way up to, and I can't say, but this has happened on more than one occasion, where we have been told in years past, if you don't like your deal, negotiate a better deal. So we've done that as a chapter. There was a county, a neighboring county in our area that we had a deal all the way up to on the agenda for the school district, and then it was pulled at the last minute. Because at that time and in that year, and again, ABC, I think, and you all deserve a lot of credit for this, the district was not as transparent about the funding formula. So nobody really ever knew how much money they were getting, and they tried to keep that, obfuscate that for as long as they could. But I think through legislative efforts and ABC's efforts, we now have the department, publishing their actual formula. So for the first time, and I'm sorry, we have 2 other agreements that, since we didn't know the actual amount of money they received, we negotiated those as a percentage. And that's with our the 2 counties in a different part of the state, actually. The contract that we negotiated with them said that we would get to keep 60% instead of 44%. Now, those contracts are great, but until you know the number, they weren't really effective. So we had the contracts in place, but we were still working on, what the number of the formula is. So it is difficult. The other thing, the controversial thing I'm going to say is, most of the providers I've talked to around the state, there's 2 I'm very close to, my own and the Tampa chapter's program, and I'd be curious, what the reimbursement rate is as some of the others, but they're very close to one another. To me, it borders almost on collusion. I don't know how you have 67 different school districts negotiating contracts with registered apprenticeship programs, 329 in the state, and they all get very close to the same reimbursement. And if the negotiation was more open and free, you would think we'd be able to go to some districts and they'd be like, 10% or 20% is a pretty good deal. It's free money, in terms of us being able to invest in our program. But they stick together and they keep it, at a certain rate.
And I'd like to hear your comments on that, Mr. Dyga. I also would like to know, what is the required paperwork to get reimbursement, to apply for this funding, and also about your career, if there's any career source relationship? Thank you.
Great question.
Recognized.
Sorry, great question. Let me back up a little bit. I think the answer, to answer your question about what it costs, is a very difficult question. Because depending on what part of the state you're in and what you got to pay instructors, depending on how high a quality of a program you want to have, right, and how much you want to invest in labs and modernization of your classrooms. And so you could do it for cheap. There's no doubt about it. And pretty much what we've had to do, I think all the providers, is educate to the level of reimbursement we're getting. And again, that's to my argument today, which is we feel like the legislature's appropriating the money and the DOE is showing very clearly in their funding formula how much they're sending to the district. If we got a larger percentage of that, we could provide a much higher quality education for our apprentices. We could expand programs, talk about facilities. almost all the conversations we've had this morning, instructors, all those are impacted by the amount of money we have in order to pay instructors. If we could pay them more, we probably would have an easier time attracting them. If we had more money to invest in facilities, we could expand in different areas and grow enrollment. So to answer the question about what it costs for us, it kind of costs us, our budget is such that we know what we're going to get reimbursed from the school district, the fees that we charge our contractors, and we invest every last dime of that, back into the education. And that's costing us much, much more down in South Florida than the $600 or $700. So your second question, I'm sorry. So there is a fair amount of paperwork, as you might imagine, involved in apprenticeship education. There's a nationwide database called Rapids, which, and again, not to get overly wonky, but every state has the opportunity to either be a SAC state, a state that kind of assumes the oversight and the management of apprenticeship education. It's called a State Apprenticeship Advisory Council state, which Florida is. Or many states choose to leave it up to the Federal Department of Labor. They're called a BAT state, a Bureau of Apprenticeship Training. So, but all of us have to participate in that RAPIDS program, as well as state program. And again, we have to submit to our partner, the actual attendance records for every last hour if we want to be reimbursed for them, as well as all 2,000 hours if we want to get the full 2,000 hours for the on-the-job training credit. We're audited, regularly by the state as well, and so there is a fair amount of paperwork. And I think that's probably what drives a lot of industry partners to partner with a union or a trade association like ABC, because we're 50 years of experience doing that, whereas they don't want to take on that headache, if you will, or that administrative cost.
Mr. Dyga, I have a clarity question. I think you mentioned earlier that the funding formula allocates about $6,600 per student. Is that correct? And that you're only getting $1,900?
It's a little lower than that. I'm sorry.
You're recognized. For
the 24-25 calendar year, the cost per unit, according to the Department of Education, that they, again, was $5,139.73 per student. Now, you multiply that by your FTE, your district cost differential and whatnot. So for us, we should be, the full amount that they're receiving for our students is $4,613.74.
Thank you. Representative Caruso, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to thank the panel for coming today and sharing their hands-on experience and wisdom in the apprenticeship education arena, especially Mr. Dyga. I want to thank you for your clear explanation of the issues that you face and all the stakeholders face, such as challenges regarding hiring instructors and restrictions on limitation of funding, et cetera. Your frankness is welcomed. And I just swallowed wrong. I wanted to point out to the members here today that while you were speaking, everybody on the panel was nodding in agreement. And we don't get that all the time, that kind of frankness and clearness of what the issues are and the problems and how to resolve them. So I just wanted to thank you, and with that, I yield back to the chair.
Thank you. Representative Kendall, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have two questions. First is for Mr. Dyga. So if you were king for the day, would you, say ABC, would you be interested in being your own LEA, which, like you said, for clarity, is a local education agency?
You're recognized.
Thank you. And thank you for the question. So absolutely. I do think there should be, the state has a vested interest in making sure that, like in our case, we're a 501c3. We're going to reinvest everything that we have in the quality of our programs and expanding them. And, I think either whether it's, it's difficult to say experience, because how do you get the experience? But there should be, obviously, to be our own LEA or be able to receive the funding directly. We're not going to sit here and say that the state shouldn't have some criteria What that is, I don't know exactly, but yes, we would be very interested.
Follow-up?
Thank you. And the second question is for Mr. Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Dyga, you're recognized.
I wanted to add to, I think for the student and also back to the question about the employers. And for one, it's a different way of learning, right? And when I said earlier, it's an equally good first choice for post-secondary education. But what's really attractive to a lot of people is it's a different way of learning. And not everybody necessarily excels well in the other way of learning. So I think that's what attracts a lot of young people. I think we have a lot going for us, and we've been horrible as an industry promoting it, and even as a culture. But young people today, to work with their hands and not be stuck in an office, these are a lot of very attractive things, I think, to young people today. And then you add on top of that, you're going to graduate with no debt, and you're going to have a very high, well-paying job with tremendous security. Now, you can do well in our industry without going through an apprenticeship program, and many people do. And again, I want to talk, just remind people, apprenticeship's not a work program, right? It's a program where contractors want to invest in their employees to make sure they receive advanced skills, that they become, true craft professionals, in their particular trade. But that's just one of the problems our industry faces. We have to have, especially in who we represent, which is the commercial side of construction, you can't build buildings like this with people who are all 6 months or less experienced. They have to be very experienced craft professionals in their trade, and that's what apprenticeship is about. And when you're a journeyman, and there's no offense to women, that's what even women in our industry will say, I'm a journeyman. It's a title. And when journeymen are going to be the most sought after, the most secure, the most high paid people in our industry. But we have a parallel problem, which is where's the future workforce coming from, which is where all the pre-apprenticeship programs, the being in the schools, the changing our culture, the changing the conversation. So we haven't spent a lot of time talking about that, but again, because of your work and the legislature's work, an awful lot has been done in the last, I would say, 5 or 6 or 8 years in pre-apprenticeship. It's exploding, which is great. So, and apprentices are working full-time, plus, I would say, in this industry, many of them are working overtime. And our programs are anywhere from 2 to 4 years. Our roofing program is 2. Our lineman program is 3, and all our other programs are 4. So they're working and going to school 1 or 2 nights a week for up to 4 years. I mean, this is an equally good first choice for post-secondary education that the state is getting an amazing return on investment for. So,
Thank you. Dr. Dyga, you're recognized.
I wanted to, in addition to addressing that, go back a little point and make a point about the employers that I don't think has been mentioned yet. Why would an employer invest in this? Well, they're getting a more skilled employee, but there's studies that we use frequently, and it's a challenge, right, sometimes to get employers to invest. But they're getting a more loyal employee. This is a fact. When you are investing in their advancement and their education, you're going to have a more loyal employee. So this is what we sell to our participating employers to try to get them to enroll. They're going to have less rework. I'm sure you've experienced this, but your apprentices are better quality work and the savings that you experience as a result of that. So, and back to the king for a day, one thing I missed was statewide matriculation. We negotiated a deal with Broward College, and I don't know if Santa Fe has this with any providers, but where a graduate apprentice who may want to go on at a later date to pursue a management degree or an associate's degree in construction management should have a leg up. They have been through a registered apprenticeship program with the state of Florida. They should get some statewide credits. And if we don't negotiate the deal, they get nothing. So if I was king for a day, I would also say the state of Florida should say, our registered apprenticeship programs qualify for so many credits, because we want to believe we're a state of lifelong learning. One of the easiest things we can do to make that happen is make sure that all the education programs that we regulate qualify for a certain number of credits as you move up the ladder. So that's a king for the day thing. My only cautionary point I want to make, and again, knowing what we know about apprenticeship, is it's not a work program because they're working in the field. So take accounting apprenticeship. So presumably you have an accounting firm that sees the value in having somebody on staff and doing the apprenticeship model, where they're maybe going to class a few nights a week, but then they have 2,000 hours a year where somebody in the accounting firm is overlooking their work and telling them, no, it's not that way, it's this way. And so if the company's there and wants it, I think we welcome. I think it's spectacular. And again, this is to the credit of the legislature and the governor for wanting to be a leader in this, why these programs are expanding. But my cautionary tale is, or my cautionary point is, we don't want to become where we're doing, we want to make sure we stay focused on where the jobs of the future are. Doesn't make a lot of sense to fall back into that traditional post-secondary model of giving degrees and things where there's no jobs of the future. Now, it's less likely to happen in an apprenticeship because you have to be employed. So if there's an employee there in a company who's willing to do it, then, you know, I think it's something that we should be open to in terms of expansion. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, and thank you for coming back to me. The first question I was going to ask, Mr. Dyga answered in one of his answers, so I didn't see the need, but I had an additional one, and it may dovetail a little bit with what Rep. Rosenwald asked. You know, we've talked about the future demand, we've talked about, and I know there's likely demand in all of the different areas of the trades, but can you share with us where you are seeing some of the most and what we can do to help address that? I mean, one of the ones that comes to mind are line erectors, given our propensity for, you know, hurricanes and whatnot, but are there others? And just as an aside, I'm glad to hear, Mr. Dyga, that things have gotten sorted out with the formulation at the district level, because I remember that was an issue the last time I was on this committee so many years ago. And there still seems to be some work to do on the 44% issue, but just generally kind of in terms of demand, what are you seeing, what are you hearing, and what can we do in that end?
You're recognized.
Great question, and it's important. And I got to be careful, you know, with members here and different trades, but not all trades are created equal in this sense. If you take just to use round numbers to keep the math simple, say it's a $100 project, you know, the fire sprinkler tradesmen and the electrical tradesmen and the plumbers are not going to all be $10, $10, $10. And so electrical is probably Steve's largest program, I imagine it's ours. So electrician is one of those trades that there's always going to be, there's more of them per project dollar that's needed to do that work than there are other trades. So you're always going to have those issues, which kind of are going to tell you up front where you're going to have larger programs and invest more in. So, you know, for us, the electrical program is the largest. Our lineman program is our second largest. We're very proud of the fact it's difficult for them to make up the hours to get reimbursed, but every time a hurricane comes through, they're all out of class. You know, they're all out, you know, getting power on, you know, in whatever part of the country, you know, so, but we work around it, you know, and they're dedicated students. So, and that's the beauty about apprenticeship. As apprenticeship is not a degree chasing a job, it's because they're employed, you know that some employer has already said, this job exists and I need it, you know, so that's the beauty about apprenticeship.
Representative Maine, did I give a comment?
One other thing, cautionary tale, I think. We get a lot as a provider. Can you start a program here? Can you start a program there? The Panhandle, more rural areas. Keep in mind what apprenticeship is. So there are people that are employed. So it is a bigger challenge in more rural areas because if you don't have enough electricians, welders, fire sprinkler fitters, you know, in that area, it's difficult to start a program for 1 or for 5, especially when we're only getting 44% of, again, back to what we could do if we were getting a larger share. We might be able to subsidize a program for 4 or 5 or 10, you know, instead of having to have 20 or 25 to make it financially feasible.
Mr. Johnson, you're recognized.
I sit on the.
Thank you. We'll move back to Representative Tant.
Madam Chair, I had a question about the local education agreements. Are those standard across the state, or do they differ? And do the reimbursements, are those standard across the state, or do they differ based on the agreements?
Thank you. I haven't seen them all, so it's difficult for me to say. My understanding is that, you know, to the extent the school districts around the state have agreements with different providers, there's probably some standardization, right? Why reinvent the wheel? They probably have shared, you know, so And we're all having to address the same things, what we're going to be reimbursed for and how much we're going to be reimbursed. And then all the legal stuff and paperwork and confidentiality. And so there's probably some similarity, but they're all negotiated individually. You know, and again, I spoke earlier about how and again, I will readily admit it's a small sample size of the 329, but the ones that I'm familiar with either aren't getting any reimbursement or they're getting at a cap at the top end somewhere around that, 1,900, 2,000 mark. So.
Thank you. Representative Kincart Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I understand that apprenticeship, they are students that are employed already. How does, and I agree that there are different pathways of success. Colleges and, 4-year degree is not always for everyone. How does, say, a high school senior that does not have, does not want to go and get a 4-year degree, how do they find out about apprenticeship programs?
You're recognized.
That's a great question. It's a challenge. If it's not in an area where a provider like ABC has good relationships with schools or school districts, a lot of the work you all have done in recent years is encouraging that. I think school districts are paying more attention, and doing more internally in terms of exposure to the options that are available to students. So there's some progress being made. That's to my point. This has been a nationwide conversation for a long time. And I don't think we're quite there yet. There's still some cultural issues. Earlier questions about who's the biggest obstacle, the parent, the student, the counselor, and it's the I agree, it's the parent in large part, because everybody wants Johnny to go to be a doctor or a lawyer, and so we've got some cultural work to do, in terms of overcoming it. But word of mouth, partnerships. If I were king for a day, I would have a statewide PSA campaign that talks about, there's a lot of options for post-secondary education or for getting a good quality job. Wouldn't it be great if we had, the state of Florida doing commercials about how it's not all one size fits all. So, because we need something to attract. That's our biggest challenge, is attracting students and parents who are willing to look at the possibilities of the careers in construction. The partnerships that we form in our communities, like in our particular case, we have a storefront down in South Florida at Junior Achievement, Finance Park. Now, so that every middle schooler, I think, that goes through in the county sees that storefront. We have great partnerships with the Boys and Girls Club and a million other community partners, because that's the only way we can attract the future workforce. That's two parallel problems. Because remember, for apprenticeship, we got to get them employed first. And then the employer has to be like, this person has, whatever it is, they've got that thing, that we want to invest in and make sure that they advance in their skills. So I don't know that they would put a dollar number. I mean, my understanding is, most of the money they keep, they're using for their own programs. And again, not to belittle the good quality stuff they're doing. But back to the point of, and again, I want to make sure I'm clear. It's not the DOE that's keeping the money. The DOE has their formula, and they're sending the money down to the districts. And the districts or colleges and universities are who we have contracts with for reimbursement. So it's the districts that are keeping 60.
Representative Tant for another question.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Have you all explored or have any thoughts on allowing apprenticeship programs or apprentices to access no-loan programs, such as like the Open Door Money, Pell, or soon-to-be short-term no-loan programs, short-term Pell? Would that help be able to get your students covered?
You're recognized.
We have thought of it, but you have to be, there's an accreditation process, which is very extensive. So
Got it.
we've been around long enough, we could do it, and we've actually talked about it so that we could access that, but we just haven't pulled the trigger, or whatnot, or done that yet. I think it would be limiting for most providers.
Follow-up?
Follow-up, Representative Tant.
Thank you. I'd like to hear from you as well. The other question I have, I learned this in my own school district recently, and that is that the students that appear to be at risk of dropping out, is there any communication by Career Source to the school district and in partnership with our state colleges and you all to help maybe save that student from dropping out because they find their passion in an apprenticeship program? Is there any work by Career Source in this component to help you get to those students?
Whoever wants to answer that on our panel can jump in. Ms. Mattis?
Thank you all again for your leadership. Thanks for having this hearing. Amazing, awesome stuff being done in the state of Florida, and we're very excited. I've never been more excited about what the future holds. I think with a few small tweaks, we could really help the apprenticeship community even do more. And it's a great investment for the state of Florida. Again, a journeyman graduate, someone who graduates from a registered apprenticeship program, is secured a job at a high wage, very secure industry. We haven't talked a lot about this, but you can't outsource construction. I mean, construction is where Florida's going to grow, and it's got to happen here. You know, a lot of our investment, and not to belittle different other industries or trades, you know, but medical, who thought that in this day and age your x-rays might be being viewed by somebody in, you know, India or somewhere else? Construction's never going to be outsourced. They're high wage, very secure jobs, 100% placement, tuition free, progressive wage increases. So anyway, thank you for your investment in apprenticeship education in the state of Florida. You can reach the ABC Institute has a website called wetrain.org. So if you want to go to that website, obviously you have my information, which I've freely welcome to be shared with anybody on the committee, as well as through our lobbying team that we work through as an organization. So, and one other thing, part of our related technical instruction at ABC is labs. It's not a requirement. It could be all schoolwork, but I second the idea of, if we haven't already reached out to you, I'd be surprised, but I would love any of you to come visit our facilities where the labs are state-of-the-art. They're amazing because it provides a higher level related technical instruction experience in addition to the on-the-job training. And I also welcome you to our graduation every year. It'll bring tears to your eyes. There are older people than they should be. We want, I'm sorry, something else that I want to mention. We track the average age of an apprentice and the average age of a first-year student. So the average age of our first-year apprentices are 28, and that's down significantly. We've tried very hard in the last few years to bring it down. What would the colleges and universities say if the average age of their freshman student were 28? Our success as a state will be measured when the average age of a first-year apprentice is close to 18, 19, right? Because that means we're not losing them for 10 years. They go out and they do something else, or they try something else, and then they realize, you know, so to me, that's something that we as a state should be tracking very closely. What is the average age of a first-year apprentice? And we're not doing a good job as a state until we get that down to the same level that you would kind of expect the average age of a freshman in the traditional college and university setting. So anyway, come on out to our graduation. It'll bring tears to your eyes. There are many, 50-year-olds and 40-year-olds in there that this is their first cap and gown in their family ceremony. We do a cap and gown, graduation with the pomp and circumstance, and it'll bring tears to your eye. Many of them have perfect attendance, working full-time for 4 years and coming to class. So they appreciate the investment you all have made as well. Thank you.